Welcome to Butterfly Fictions, where your favorite worlds collide in the craziest ways imaginable. Today, we're diving into part 1 of an epic what if, where Deadpool doesn't just crash into the wizarding world. He hijacks Harry Potter's childhood and turns him into a super soldier. That's right, chaos, comedy, and chaos again. Let's find out what happens when the boy who lived meets the merc with a mouth. Deadpool was just hanging around on the London Underground, literally. He had hooked himself in a dark corner by the door of the compartment. It was his desire to cause chaos. If not for the Avengers, or the X-Men, then for his own amusement. It took a great feat of cunning to get the time stone and a sling ring when no one would notice. He was sure that Stephen Strange knew, but he seemed to find it funny. It was like the guy with no sense of humor needed a break, but he, himself, was unable to do anything to relieve the tension that was building up. So, Deadpool walked in the London sanctuary, in the dead of night, and took a sling ring in the eye of Agamotto. Well, he was only borrowing it. While it was neat to run around time at all, he didn't want to kill his father on accident. That, of course, led him to 1941, where he, appropriated. Yeah, sure, appropriated the super soldier serum. So here he was, the eye hidden in one of his many belt pouches, and serum within reach, hanging out in 1991 London. He was watching all the passengers come and go from the train. He was looking for something specific. His eyes widened under his mask when he spotted one of the largest men he had ever seen, bigger than the Hulk. But this guy, with his scraggly beard and his booming voice, put the Hulk to shame. He seemed like a nice guy, more Bruce Banner's personality in the Hulk's body. Next to the overly large man was a tiny boy. Just what Deadpool was looking for. Scraggly kid, clothes 3 sizes too big for him. Underweight by at least 25 pounds. Looks young for his age, given his grasp on the Queen's English. So, either the kid was a genius, or he was short. Maybe both. But what caught Deadpool's attention was the taped-together eyeglasses. That meant the kid wasn't cared for, the clothes could be passed off as fashion. No, those glasses were a sign that he was neglected at best. That and the way the boy's eyes darted around, like he was waiting for someone to come and ruin all his fun. Funny things, these muggles come up with, the giant man was saying as he looked around the compartment. Deadpool had to wonder what was interesting to the large man. It all seemed normal to him. "What's a muggle?" the tiny scrawny boy asked, wrinkling his nose at the word. It sounded like something his uncle would say. That wasn't a good thing. "Non-magical," the giant failed to whisper. With a voice that boomed across the whole train at normal volume, the whisper made everyone within 10 feet look at the man strangely. "Oh," the kid said, still not liking the word. This boy was what he, Deadpool, had hoped to find. He was scrawny, unkempt, and looked like he needed something new in his life. Since Deadpool knew nothing about magicals, damn paranoid group that, he wondered what would happen if he chose this kid. Obviously, the kid didn't know anything about magic either. A wizard on the serum, decisions. Making up his mind, he decided to follow them. The kid and the giant disappeared into a dark tavern. Since Deadpool wanted to see what was what, he wandered in. The people sitting around gave him some queer looks, but for the most part ignored the costumed man. It was like it was normal to wear a form-fitting bodysuit, complete with mask. He did hear someone mumble, "Things muggles wear these days." "Ha," was all he said, then quickly followed the giant, when all the well-wishers stopped harassing the kid. Thanks to them, though, he now knew that the boy's name was Harry Potter. Might have to change that. What kind of superhero goes by Harry? He asked no one, looking to his right as if there were someone there. Deadpool followed them into the magical alley, where he quickly snatched a robe off a passerby. Poor man didn't even know how it happened. One minute he was clothed, the next in his undies. While Deadpool was up on the roof before he was caught. He stalked his prey to a large white marble building. He wondered if it was a place to rob, but held that thought at the advice of his little yellow box. The two came out about a half an hour later, to which Deadpool had robbed over 20 people of their gold, because why not? A bored Deadpool is a naughty Deadpool, just ask Wolverine. All through the day, he followed the kid and giant. When the giant left the kid to get himself home, he decided it was time. "Hey, kid," he said, when he dropped in front of the boy. "Ah," Harry said, looking at the red and black clothed, masked man wearing a robe of baby blue. Was all he could say to what he was seeing. "I've got an offer for you," Deadpool said, leading the kid to the train station. "My teacher told me to never take candy from a stranger," Harry said, giving him the hairy eyeball. "First magic, now some stranger is offering him something else. Could his birthday get any weirder? Good thing I'm not offering candy. Besides, the readers would kill me if I hurt you, the masked man said, handing over the money for a train ride to wherever. Where are we going? I have to get home soon, or the Dursleys will flip, the preteen said, tugging at the arm that the costumed man was holding. It was hard enough to drag his trunk one-handed, now his other arm was captured, making it harder. First off, I'll make sure you get home when we're done. Pinky promise. I'll even talk to your family. Right now, though, I'm going to make you a hero, Deadpool said, dragging the not quite protesting child along. Like Captain America? The boy asked eagerly. Just so, was the answer. Neat, Harry said, following along on his own accord. Will I be able to beat up Uncle Vernon? He asked, hope filling his eyes. Sure, why not? But, if you're going to be a hero, you can't go around bashing everyone who pisses you off. That's what anti-heroes do, Deadpool said proudly, puffing out his chest. You should take that robe off, Harry said, pointing at the light-colored robe. It looks like you're trying to hide or something, he added when the man didn't stop. Nah, the author says it looks cute. Something about contrast, Deadpool said, waving the advice away. Was all Harry said, trying to figure out what the hell the man was talking about. Don't worry about it, kid, the red and black clothed man said, getting up to get off the train. Is this our stop? Harry asked as he grabbed his trunk and hurried after him. Yeah, sure, kid, Wade answered, leading the way out of the station, down the street then into an alley. He led the kid far back in the alley and watched in amusement as the kid pulled his wand. Like he knew any spells. Still, had to give the kid credit for effort. How are you going to make me a hero here? Harry asked, for the first time afraid he made a mistake. He usually was a good judge of character. This guy didn't give off evil vibes, more mischievous. Don't worry, I'm not going to kill you or anything. I've come from the future, and I wanted to give you a hands up on your destiny, Deadpool said, going by what his yellow box was telling him. He didn't want to lie to the child, but hey, chaos. What's my destiny? The wary kid asked, watching the man closely. Something about an evil git trying to kill you, the bi-colored clothed man said, finally shucking the baby blue robe. He didn't know if that was true, but it was the usual spiel, so he was going with it. Americans don't say git, Harry said, lifting an eyebrow. That was something he heard once on the telly. Why not? It's an awesome word? The affronted man asked, then reached into somewhere and pulled out a needle. He held it in front of him and said, this is what's going to turn you into a hero, like Captain America. Really? The awestruck boy asked, lowering his wand and moving forward to see the stuff that would let him beat up Uncle Vernon. Really and truly, Deadpool said, reaching forward and jabbing the needle in the kid's upper arm that was showing out of his far too big shirt. Harry's eyes rolled into the back of his head and he dropped like a stone. Deadpool looked at the fourth wall and said, well, that worked. Didn't it though? Came a voice from behind him. What? Wade yelled, flipping around, and seeing the Sorcerer Supreme looking at him from a portal. Strange, what are you doing here? Deadpool asked with a bit of trepidation in his voice. Not that he was scared of Strange, but he could mess up his plans. Which right now were, to get back to his own time. Retrieving my stone, the man said as he summoned said stone to him. And my ring, he added, also taking the sling ring from the costumed man. But I need those, Deadpool said, jumping over to the portal to take them back. Give them back, asshole. I stole them fair and square. You knew I was going to be doing some shit. So why fuck with me now? I did know, and I knew this was how to continue it on. There were many possibilities, but you chose the hard one. As usual. So, no, you made this mess, you deal with it. Don't you know who that is? Stephen Strange asked, pointing at the still unconscious boy. Some kid who needed help, Wade said, looking at Harry like he was a new bug. Interesting, with the potential to be deadly. I gave it to him, so I'm done. No, you idiot, that is Harry Potter. He's a prophecy child, and you've gone and made him a super soldier. And since you don't have any Vita Rays, you will have to walk him through how to use his strength, the Sorcerer Supreme pointed out, laughing at the look he was sure was on Wade's face. Not that he could see through the mask, but gobsmacked is what he was envisioning. But, the costumed anti-hero sputtered, looking still at the boy. Then he perked up, never one to be down for more than a minute. His chaos-inducing mind going a mile a minute on how far he could take the kid. What's he prophesied to do? He asked, turning toward Stephen. Vanquish a Dark Lord. I believe the man's name is Voldemort, or his given name is Tom Marvolo Riddle. I know that young Harry already has vanquished him once, but the man lives on as a wraith. He will regain a body one day. You can help him fulfill the prophecy by training him, the other man said, still standing on the other side of the portal. He didn't trust Wade not to attack him. If there was one constant on Deadpool, it was that he was unpredictable. Yeah, the kid is scared of his family too, Deadpool said, bending over to pick Harry up and flinging the boy over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. He then took the boy's trunk up in his other arm, tucking it there, like it weighed nothing. Yes, they are some of the worst types of people. Well, have fun, Steven said, closing the portal. Don't worry, I will, Deadpool said, patting the boy's legs and then jumping to the fire escape above him. He didn't know where he was going, but when he got there, he was going to have fun. Harry woke up halfway through the city. Hey, he cried from his position on Deadpool's shoulder. All he saw was the back of that weird red and black one-piece suit. Put me down, or I'm going to barf, he said, putting his hand over his mouth to prevent just that. Deadpool hopped to the next roof and dumped the boy immediately on the floor. No spewing on the suit, the man said, pointing to Harry. Where are we? Harry asked, not sure what was happening, but knowing he needed to get home soon. The sun was getting low, and he needed to cook dinner. Though he wasn't sure the Dursleys would be home, he didn't want to take the chance. That and he was starving. He didn't know why, but he was very hungry. It felt like he could eat a whole cow. London, the masked man said, looking around to get the general idea where they were. He didn't know London as well as he knew New York, but he had studied the map of the city before he decided to kidnap the kid. You know, just in case he needed it. That doesn't tell me anything, complained the child. I need to get home, he said instead, looking at his trunk still tucked under Deadpool's arm. Thanks for bringing my trunk, he said politely. If nothing else, the Dursleys did beat manners into him. Sure, no problem, kid. Tell me where you live and I'll get you home, he promised. Staring at the child, though Harry could only guess where his eyes were, and contemplating how he was going to train the kid. Privet Drive, Surrey, Harry said, looking at the man strangely. He still didn't know what the man had done to him, and really hoped what he said was true and that he was going to be a superhero. Will I really be like Captain America? He finally asked, standing up and wiping the dirt off his trousers. With a bit of training, Deadpool promised, picking him up like he was a baby, not sure if he wanted the kid in a fireman's carry again. He then shifted him, so he was in a piggyback position. Hang on, he called and then jumped again. He landed on the street near a bus stop. He then looked at the map to get an idea which way he needed to go. Upon seeing where it was, he jumped back on the building, making those around him point and stare. Whoa, Harry said, enjoying the ride. This is wicked, he shouted in the man's ear. Just hang on, Wade said, getting to the part of the city where the buildings were lower and harder to jump. They were soon at the edge of London, and Deadpool stopped and dropped back to the street. We'll take the train from here, he said, pulling some money from somewhere. Where did you get money? Harry asked, not seeing anywhere the man could be carrying a wallet. Here and there, Deadpool said, counting his stolen funds. He had been pickpocketing the entire time he'd been in this timeline. Oh, was all the boy could say to that. They went into the underground and caught the correct train and were soon in Surrey. The other passengers on the train pointed and whispered at the strange duo. More so the man than the boy. They got off near Privet Drive and started walking. My relatives are going to hate you, Harry commented, not sure if that was a good thing or bad. I could care less, Wade said, hefting the trunk into a more comfortable position. They don't like anything not normal, the kid explained, leading the way to number 4 Privet Drive. They are really mean about it, he warned. I'm super strong, kid. And I'm one scary motherfucker, he said, flexing his muscles on his unoccupied arm. Whoa, Harry said, hoping that this man would put the Dursleys in their place. He would be happy to see them taken down a peg or two. Just don't kill them, please, he stated, giving Wade his puppy dog eyes. Why the hell not? I can tell they're abusers, Wade asked, not liking that he couldn't unalive anyone. They are the only family I have left, Harry said, pulling his too large shirt a bit. I mean, yeah, they are mean, but they did take me in, he added, then smirked. You can scare them though. Well, I am good at scaring people, Deadpool said, then looked off to the side like he was reading something only he could see. The author says that they need to live for some reason, he whined, not liking that everyone was telling him to behave. Maybe they are important to the story, Harry said, not sure what the man was talking about but deciding to play along. I like you, kid, Deadpool said, waving to the people staring at them from behind curtains. Hello, he called to one neighbor, who was watering their lawn. Don't you know there's a water shortage, asshole? He said in an angry manner. That means no watering lawns, dumbass, he added, going up the side of the house and turning off the hose, then breaking the knob so it wouldn't turn back on. Dickweed, he said as he jumped to where Harry was watching with his mouth hanging open. Is there really a water shortage? The boy asked as they continued down the road. Yes, there is only a set amount of water for the whole world, and we're getting short on drinkable water, Wade answered, hefting the trunk onto his shoulder. Are we there yet? He asked, tired of wandering around this cookie-cutter neighborhood. Damn, but he hated the suburbs. Yeah, it's right there, Harry said, pointing to the house he grew up in. He looked at the sky to get the general idea what time it was, and he knew the yelling would start as soon as he was in the door. He did have to wonder how they got home from the island, since Hagrid had taken the boat, but decided it was unimportant. With dragging feet, he led the way to number 4. He didn't bother knocking, since he lived there, he just opened the door. Deadpool right behind him. I'm back, he called to the house. Freak, a loud male voice came from the left. They heard some grunting and groaning as someone tried to get out of the chair they were sitting in. Deadpool figured out right quick the person was fat and out of shape. There was no way a healthy person made that much noise getting up. Fat, huh? He asked Harry, who only nodded, but had a wicked grin on his face. Freak, the loud bellow came again, this time accompanied by loud footsteps. You'd better have a good reason for being this late, the fat man said as he rounded the corner. Shut it, fatso, Deadpool said, putting the trunk on the floor and meeting the fat man halfway. Who the hell are you? Another freak? Dursley said, getting in the man's face. He was used to people backing off from his bulk. Deadpool didn't even bother to answer, he just punched the guy straight in the gut. His fist buried to halfway up his forearm, the guy was that fat. Vernon Dursley had never been punched before. It hurt. Badly. He doubled over in pain and there were tears in his eyes. But that didn't matter, because the masked man that had punched his stomach was now punching his face. He landed on his arse and sat there crying at the pain. The woman, who had come to watch her nephew be yelled at, started screaming. So Deadpool punched her in the face too. She landed next to her husband, completely stunned. The child, who would one day be as big as his father, waddled up the stairs as fast as his fat legs would let him. Wicked, Harry said, smiling at his family's predicament. While he didn't want them dead, they did deserve a bit of justice handed out to them. A bit of training, and you'll be able to do the same, Wade said, picking up the trunk and stepping on Vernon's already aching stomach, then face, and going to the stairs. Which room is yours, kid? He asked, waiting for Harry to skirt around his relatives. The smallest one at the top of the stairs, he said, moving as quickly as he could around his uncle. He didn't want to get grabbed. However, the man seemed to be lost in his pain. His aunt was in shock. Who's the fat kid? Deadpool asked, looking at the door the other child had ran through. That's my cousin Dudley, Harry answered, a look of revulsion on his face. He's not a nice person, he added, grabbing the knob to the door of his room. This is where I sleep now, he said, proudly. It was loads better than the cupboard. Now? Wade asked, catching that word right away. Where did you sleep before? He asked, looking around the sparse room. There was a rickety bed and an old desk. That was it. There was a closet, which he assumed the kid put his clothes in. He went to open the door but was stopped by a hand on his wrist. I wouldn't, Harry said, releasing the man's wrist. I had to shove a load of stuff in there, he explained. Where's all of your stuff? The masked man asked, putting the trunk on the bed. I don't really have that much, Harry confessed in a soft voice. He plucked his shirt again, and added, most of my stuff was Dudley's. I see, was all Deadpool said as he wandered to the door. You never did answer my question. Where did you sleep before? Under the stairs, Harry whispered, not really wanting to tell the man, but he didn't want to lie to him either. I see, Wade said again, this time opening the door. He looked down the stairs to see the woman had woken up from her stupor and was headed for the phone. Well, he couldn't let that happen, so he jumped off the landing and landed right in front of her, making her scream in terror. No calling the cops, he said, wagging a finger at her. She jumped back to where her husband was still groaning on the floor. Vernon, do something, she said, yanking on his arm to get him moving. Deadpool and Harry watched as the huge mass of fat tried to get off the floor. Do you need a hand? Wade asked, tilting his head a bit as if contemplating on whether or not he could help. Never mind, I'd need a crane to get that much up, he said, nodding his head decisively. Really? Harry said in disbelief. He figured the guy was stronger than that. I thought you were super strong, he added with an impish grin. No, not really, but I don't want to touch that if I don't have to, the masked man said, laughing at his own joke. Oh, Harry said, inching away from the obviously crazy man. It wasn't even funny. Tough room, Deadpool said, still watching Dursley try and fail to get off the floor, even with his wife helping him. Finally, they pulled a chair to the guy to use as leverage, and Vernon lumbered up. Finally, he exclaimed, only to sucker punch the guy right back onto the floor. Petunia screamed again and backed away. Why are you doing this? She screeched, putting her hand on her heart. I hate child abusers, was the answer from the masked man, who was nonchalantly leaning on the wall. I would never hurt my Dudley, the woman said as if that were the only child in the house. Just the fact that you didn't include Harry, makes me mad, Deadpool said, moving in her direction. Wait, she said, holding her hands up to ward him off. I never touched the freak, she said, telling the truth. The frying pan might have, but her hands were clean. Ah, but you let it happen, Deadpool said, though he did stop advancing on her. They never really hit me hard, Harry said as he went to hold the man off from beating his Aunt more. But they did hit you, Wade pointed out, glaring at Vernon, who was once more trying to get up. This time using the chair. He was making better progress. And I can tell that they neglect you, he pointed out, gesturing to the way the boy was dressed and his broken glasses. They didn't have to take me in, Harry pointed out, standing in front of his aunt. He didn't care if the man hit his uncle again. That man deserved it. The freak is right, Petunia said, only to scream when Deadpool threw a knife at her head. Don't call him that, the masked man spit out, emphasizing each word with a hand gesture. He is a freak, Vernon said, pulling himself up to his full height. If you understood that, you wouldn't be defending him. He stood tall, but far away from the man who had punched him. He inched his way to his wife, in hopes to protecting her. For an answer, Deadpool pulled off his mask. The distorted face stared at them, daring them to say something. Whoa, Harry said, going up to the man to get a closer look. Does it hurt? He asked in a childlike manner. He reached up as if to touch the scars, but Deadpool stopped him. No, it did at the time, but now it just looks bad, Wade said, gently lowering the boy's arm. How did it happen? The child asked, not the least bit intimidated by the man's face. The Dursleys, on the other hand, were terrified. A secret organization was trying to make super soldiers, but they failed. That's how I got my face. I burned them to the ground, he explained in simple terms. Will my face do that? Harry asked, a bit worried. He was already a freak by being magical. He didn't want to scare people. No, you'll still be the handsome boy that you are now, Wade said, smiling at the child. You, on the other hand, might not be so lucky, he said, pointing to Vernon. You have no right, freak, the fat man said, in an act of bravery. Right? What does that have to do with anything? I'm not the government. Your rights don't mean jack shit to me, Deadpool said, moving forward once again. Then he stopped, looked to the left and listened. Damn it, Fairywm, quit ruining my fun, he shouted at nothing. What? Harry asked, looking to where the man was and seeing nothing but a wall. Never mind, the man said, with a defeated look and posture. He then put his mask back on and pointed to the couch. Sit, he told the Dursleys. We're going to talk, he said, slumping in the recliner in the room. Harry, go unpack your shit, he told the boy. No killing, Harry said, making his way slowly out of the room. The author won't let me, the man whined, putting his face in his hands. All right then, Harry said, leaving the adults to talk. Listen up, and listen up good, Deadpool said, lifting his head when he knew that Harry was at the top of the stairs. This is what's going to happen, he finished with menace in his voice. The Dursleys cowered in their seats. You're going to let me stay here with Harry, Deadpool said, pulling a gun from somewhere and holding it in his lap. The two Dursleys were still sitting on the couch, cringing back in fear. I have some unfinished business with him. If you don't let me stay, or you call the cops, you'll be dead. I have no issue killing you. At all, he said the last words with a great deal of cheer as if it would make him the happiest man in the world, which it would. For all of 2 seconds. Then he'd be looking for something else to kill. You can't do this, Petunia stated, clutching her husband's fat hand. You'll never get away with it, Vernon said, holding his wife's hand just as hard. "We're good upstanding citizens. No one will believe you belong here," he finished with a gloat. "I don't care what your neighbors think," Deadpool said, casually raising the gun, but pointing up the stairs. That caused both Dursleys to blanch. Dudley was up there. Deadpool would never kill a kid, but they didn't need to know that. "I will be staying," he said, finality in his voice. "Besides, the author says I must." "Damn bitch that she is." He looked straight at a wall and stuck his tongue out. The Dursleys were more convinced than ever that the man was straight up crazy. Who talked like that? Only a mad man. They decided to do what he wanted. Perhaps he'd go with the boy to that school of his. Vernon actually got contemplative over that thought. It would serve the Magicals right for dumping the freak on his normal family. "But, how would we explain you?" Petunia wanted to know. "Like Vernon said, no one in this neighborhood would accept that you belong." She was glancing at the window, like the neighbors were already talking. Which they were, but she didn't know that. "Tell them the truth, no one will believe you." "I mean, what can you say? A mass murderer is protecting a wizard child from his magic-hating family?" Deadpool stated, lifting an eyebrow, not that they saw it, but it was in his tone. The Dursleys exchanged looks, knowing what the man said was true. No matter how they spun it, no one would believe them. It was bad enough they had to constantly make excuses for the Potter brat, now they would have to explain why a man in costume was at their house. Their lives just got harder. Deadpool didn't care. He was going to crash in the guest bedroom, and make sure that Harry got some training before he went to that school the boy had been shopping for. He didn't know how much time he had until the kid left, but he would make as much progress before then. Then he would see about how to get into the school. There was no way he could pass as a student. And with his costume he couldn't pass as a teacher. He'd find a way, or the author would make up some bullshit that would be totally unbelievable. Fan fiction writers were strange that way. He did love how they messed up the timelines though. Hey, maybe he was in a crack fic, that would be cool. Then he wouldn't have to mind his P's and Q's. Then again, he could just bully his way in. They really couldn't stop him if he just showed up and hung around. He was nigh on indestructible. He had died so many times, that he was sure that even magic couldn't kill him. Though the look on their faces when they tried would be worth the trouble it would be. "Right," he said, putting his gun away, somewhere, and putting his hands on his knees. He then stood and started out of the room. "Just remember my threat and we'll get along just fine," he said over his shoulder. He then went up the stairs. He noted the fat kid was looking out of a crack in his door. Just to fuck with the kid, he lurched forwards and said, "Boo." Dudley squeaked and slammed the door shut. Harry, who was watching, laughed his arse off. "That was great," the boy said, waving Deadpool to his room. "I was just fucking with him." "I'd never hurt a kid," the masked man said, taking a seat on the bed, which was the only place to sit. The desk had a chair, but it didn't look like it would hold his weight. "Don't tell the fat pig or the horse that. I used that threat to keep them in line," he warned Harry. "I won't." "So, how are we going to train?" "It's not like there's a gym here," Harry asked, taking a seat in the desk chair. "Is there one nearby?" Deadpool asked, already going over how he was going to get the kid up to snuff without one. There were tons of things that could be used in place of gym equipment. "I don't know. I'm not allowed to roam the neighborhood. They've got everyone convinced I'm some kind of delinquent," the messy-haired boy said, with sadness evident. He hated that the whole place thought that of him. He'd never hurt anyone in his short life. And he didn't plan on breaking the law, ever. "I'll look around tonight, after I get you all locked in for the night," Deadpool said, stretching out on the bed. "Locked in?" Harry said with trepidation. He didn't want to be locked up. "I have to keep the walrus out of your room, especially when I'm not around," the man said, pulling his mask off. As much as he didn't like people seeing his face, that mask was hot. "I don't trust him not to take all this out on you," he added, wiping the sweat off his face. "Oh," Harry said, silently agreeing with that assessment. "Don't worry about it, kid. I'm still one scary motherfucker," he said, sitting up and tucking his mask in one of his many pouches. "What are you going to wear?" "You can't stay in costume all the time," Harry asked, concerned for the man who was helping him. "You let me worry about that," Deadpool said, standing up and stretching. "Hungry?" He asked to change the topic, that and he was starving as well. "Starved," Harry said, getting up to follow the man downstairs. "I could eat a whole cow," he added, just to make sure the man understood just how hungry he was. Even when they made him miss meals, he had never been this starved. It was like his bones were crying for substance. "Well, let's get you fed then," Deadpool said, starting down the stairs with a whistle. Are we going to eat here? Harry asked, not really wanting to eat around his relatives. No, there has to be a restaurant nearby, the masked man said, going to the front door. He put his hand on the knob then paused. He reached behind him and pulled out a set of clothes. He quickly put them on. Just a pair of jeans and a hoodie. Not that he cared what people thought, but he'd get better service if he was dressed in civvies. You look different, Harry commented as he watched Deadpool pull on the hood, which hid his entire face. His costumed feet stuck out like he was wearing red slippers. And his hands were in red gloves. The rest of him was covered by the clothes, but he still looked weird. Not as strange as he would have if he hadn't put the clothes on, but still. Yeah, not seeing the mask can do that. Besides, I can't eat with it on, and I don't want people to barf looking at my ugly mug, the man said, opening the door and going outside. They wandered out of the residential area and were soon in a shopping center. There was a small diner off to the side, so they went there. After being seated, they looked at the menu. Order what you want, kid, Deadpool said, already knowing what he wanted. He had never had British fish and chips, so he wanted to see if it differed from the American kind. I'm really hungry though, Harry warned the man, trying to get over the novelty of being in a restaurant. He looked at all the choices and decided on the adult-sized shepherd's pie. If he was still hungry later, maybe he could have dessert. He'd never had any before, except for the measly stuff they served at school. He wondered if Hogwarts was better. I'm cool with that, the man said, waving over the waitress. He put in the order and added a large side of fries, or chips as they were called here, for Harry. If he was right about the kid, then he would need to eat as much as he could. He would probably change a bit overnight, and for the foreseeable future. Thanks, Harry said with a grin. He was going to enjoy time with this man. Hopefully, Deadpool didn't kill anyone that didn't deserve it. They ate their dinner, had seconds, and had some blueberry pie with ice cream afterwards. Wade had to admit the fish and chips were better here. Perhaps it was the batter? Oh well, Americans can't be great at everything. With full bellies they decided to go back to the Dursleys, after Deadpool made a quick stop to get the lock he wanted for Harry's room. From what he'd seen so far there wasn't a gym near the house. So, he'd have to make it up as he went along. He'd snag Vernon's credit card and make the fat lard pay for it. It would serve the man right for all the abuse he had given Harry. For all he knew, the fat man was getting paid to take care of Harry. He'd have to do some questioning to see if he was. HPDP. Give me your credit card, fat boy, Deadpool said after the kids were put to bed for the night. The lock on Harry's door was high enough to keep the door from opening. Instead of a keyed lock he got a slider. That way if Harry needed to get out, he could. I most certainly will not, Vernon blustered, standing to his full height. Like that had worked before. You most certainly will, the masked man said, pulling a gun and putting it directly on Vernon's forehead. Or I will decorate the wall behind you with your lovely pink brains. I find that type of decoration delightful, but I'm sure you, and your wife, will disagree, he said, cocking the gun. Tick, tock, fat boy, he said, making the ticking noise of a clock. Vernon didn't say any more, he just opened his wallet and took out one of his credit cards, and handed it over. Smarter than you look, Deadpool said, putting the gun away, somewhere. I have a question, and believe me I will know if you lie, do you get money to raise Harry? He asked, tucking the credit card into the pocket of the jeans he still wore. That is to say. I mean. Yes, damn it. I deserve to get money for having the. Was as far as he got when he felt the metal of the gun on his forehead again. You did a piss poor job of it, Deadpool said as if talking about the weather. I'll be taking that money as well, he added, tapping the nozzle of the gun on the man's forehead, as if to remind him that it was still there. You can't, Petunia said, wringing her hands at just how fucked up her life was at the moment. Dudley needs that money, she added, like it would make a difference. No, Dudley needs your money. Harry needs Harry's money. See how that works, Harry's money. They go together, like PB&J, Deadpool said, taking the gun off the man's head and pointing to the woman. She shrieked and moved back until she hit the wall. Please, my baby needs to eat, she pleaded like they were suddenly made dirt poor. You are stupid, aren't you? The costumed man asked, releasing his grip on the gun and stowing it away. It had served his purpose. Your whale of a kid could stand to lose a pound or two, or stones as you call them. Though I don't know how many pounds equal a stone. Meh, I don't care. The point is your boy is fat. He added, tilting his head to the side as if she had just become interesting. You really don't see how you're hurting your own kid, do you? He asked, baffled as to how they could think spoiling the child was healthy. Surely, your doctors have told you to lose weight? He asked Vernon. Like they know anything, the man grumbled, ignoring the fact that he could hardly move half the time, or breathe for that matter. He was just hefty. Deadpool looked to the side and said, "Can you believe this shit?" Then he turned back to the two clueless people. "Just get me the money," he snarled and left the room, grumbling to himself about self-destructive people. "Vernon, what are we to do?" he heard Petunia ask. So, he slowed down to listen. "I'll get him when he sleeps," the fat man said in something close to a whisper, but not quite. "How?" Petunia snapped. "Do you have a gun?" she asked in a tone that said he'd better not have one. "Of course not, pet. I just mean I will." Choke him, yeah. He has to sleep some time," Vernon said in that not-so-quiet whisper. At least one of them was cautious enough to not speak loudly. "Just to fuck with them," Deadpool called out. "Think again, fat boy." Then he muttered to himself that he really needed to come up with some more nicknames for the fat man. "Get it together, Fairywm, think of something better than fat boy," he grumbled, looking at the wall again. Then he went out the window of the guest room. He needed to get the lay of the land. Harry would be different soon, healthier, and smarter. He, Deadpool, needed to figure out how to train that. The next morning when Harry woke up, the man, whose name he still didn't know, was sitting cross-legged on the floor with his eyes closed. He was wearing the same hoodie and jeans as last night, but his suit was gone. His hood was down showing his scarred head, and there was a pair of swords on his lap. "Mister," Harry said softly, not wanting to disturb him, but he had a question. "Mister," he said again, this time slipping out of bed. The unmasked man cracked an eye open and said, "What? What's your name, and where did the swords come from?" The child asked, reaching his hand out to touch them. "You can call me Deadpool, or Wade, I'll answer to either. As for the swords, I've always had them," Wade said, opening both eyes to look at the kid like he was crazy. How desperate had this kid been if he went off with a stranger, who had never given his name? Then Deadpool remembered the Dursleys. Yeah, he would have too. "No, Mr. Deadpool, you haven't," Harry said, drawing his hand back. "I think I would remember if you had swords." "Look, kid, first of all don't call me mister. Second of all these are katanas, and they are mine, their names are B and Arthur, and I've always had them," he reiterated, pointing a finger at the kid as if for him to say he was wrong. Well, he'd had them the entire time he'd been in Britain and knew Harry. That was neither here nor there. All the kid needed to know is that they were his. "I wouldn't have come with you if you had." "Katanas," Harry said, very seriously. Well as an 11-year-old could." "You named your swords?" he added as an afterthought. Then shrugged, if the guy wanted to name his swords, who was he to say anything? Perhaps he should name his wand. "Yes, I named my katanas," the affronted man said, then answered the other topic. "They were just out of sight. I promise they were always there." "You're a wizard for crying out loud, get used to strange things," Deadpool said, standing up and putting the katanas in their scabbards on his back, making them cross over his spine. They seemed to disappear from sight, like there was magic on them. He then went to the door, turned, and said, "Get dressed, kid, we'll go get something to eat, do some shopping, courtesy of your uncle, then I've got a surprise for you." He then went downstairs to terrorize the Dursleys some more. If the author wasn't going to let him kill them, then by the gods he was going to scare the living hell out of them. HPDP. Harry was about to go to the bathroom when there was a hoot at the window. He turned around and saw the owl Hagrid had given him. He smiled and went to open the window to let her in. When she flew through, he closed it. "Hello, girl. I'll have to do some research, but I'll find a name for you," he said, petting the owl's chest. She hooted again and moved her feet side to side, trying to get a good grip on the headboard. Harry smiled again, and hurried through his morning routine, mostly just washing up and brushing his teeth. He had never been allowed to use the bathroom for long. He still didn't have clothes of his own, but Wade had promised that he would. So, he moved as quickly as possible, yet still getting clean and fresh. Slipping on the least baggy clothes he had, noticing that they fit better today, he moved to go down the stairs. He was flabbergasted when he heard a voice that sounded like a baby mocking the Dursleys. "What's the matter, you don't like what I made for you?" Deadpool teased, making sad eyes at the adult Dursleys. Dudley was sent to play as soon as the man had entered the dining room. He didn't want to traumatize the kid, like he was his parents. "I cooked them just for you," he whined in a baby voice. Harry hurried to the room to see what Wade was doing. He loved that someone was giving back some of what Harry had endured. As he rounded the stairs, he saw Deadpool in a frilly apron, brandishing a spatula. He was waving at the Dursleys who had piles of rotted food on their plates. "I cook, I clean, and this is the thanks I get?" Deadpool said, stamping his foot on the floor and waving his implement around. His hood was still down, and they were getting the full effect of his face. He was wavering from one emotion to another. One moment he was childlike, the next he was a stressed housewife. They were still waiting for the mood to turn threatening. This was just humiliating so far. The Dursleys were staring at their plates, which had once held a full English breakfast, heavy on the fat. They had no idea how the rotten food came to be, but they were thankful that Dudley at least got to finish his food before being sent away. "Deadpool, are you really going to make them eat that?" Harry asked, pointing to the plates of gross stuff. "Nah, I was just waiting for you," the costumed man said, making the apron and spatula disappear. "I made sure the kid ate before I sent him away," he added, in case Harry thought he was some type of child abuser. "Oh, okay," the child said, not sure why he told him this, but appreciated it anyway. "Oh, my owl showed up," he added, bouncing up and down in excitement. "Your owl?" Deadpool questioned, not having seen the animal the day before. Or at least he didn't remember seeing one. "Yes, Hagrid, that's the big man, bought her for me. She was my first birthday present ever," Harry said, still bouncing. "Your first?" Wade said, with a threat in his voice, that wasn't lost on the Dursleys. "Yeah, she's great," the boy said, finally settling down. "Why didn't you have her when I picked you up?" "I let her fly here. I didn't want to keep her in a cage. It felt wrong," the boy confessed, his excitement diminished a bit. "I'm happy for you, kid," Deadpool said, shooting the adults a glare. He then turned back to Harry. "Let's get you something to eat, then some clothes. For you and me," the man said, putting his hand on Harry's shoulder and steering him to the front door. He slipped on some shoes that he got from somewhere. He flipped up his hood and opened the door. "Don't wait up," he called behind him. "I'll just get you up anyway," he added, laughing at their stricken expressions. He knew they were trying to think of ways to escape, and truthfully, if they managed, he wasn't going to stop them. They were really small potatoes in the realm of things. HPDP. Harry and Wade ate at the same diner, and went shopping for clothes. It was really uneventful, except when Deadpool tried on a shirt and was seen without his hood. The store clerk nearly had a heart attack. He explained it away as having been in a fire, and she was kind enough to give them an employee's discount. "Always play the pity card, if you can," he imparted to Harry as they made their way out of the store. "Especially to the girls." He nodded as if that was sage advice. Harry looked at him weird, but he nodded along and filed it away until he was older. They went back to the Dursleys and noted that the relatives weren't in. Wade didn't know if they did a runner or were just taking a day. He didn't care. They put their stuff away and Deadpool took Harry into the backyard. "Okay," he said, pulling something that was squawking from behind his back and putting it on the ground. "You're going to catch this chicken," he finished, looking the boy up and down, and noticed that the kid had grown a bit overnight. Not much but a few inches and quite a bit of weight. He then realized that perhaps he should have waited to buy the kid clothes, because he was going to get bigger still. "Chase a chicken?" the confused boy asked, looking at the bird that was pecking the ground in front of it. "Why?" he asked, moving towards the bird. He did feel stronger this morning, and after having breakfast, he felt like he could run around the world. There was just so much energy to burn. "Have you ever tried to catch one of these monsters?" the aghast Wade asked, pulling down his hoodie and pointing at the bird. "They are wily," he whispered as if it were a great secret. "Okay," the doubtful Harry said, moving still closer to the bird, who looked up sensing the danger. He lunged for it, and the bird moved, fast. It swerved and fluttered all over the yard, making quite a racket. Harry gave chase and was trying his best to catch the chicken without hurting it. "Come on, Harry, you've got this. I believe in you," Deadpool said, then looked to the right and said, "He's never going to get that bird." He looked back and clapped at a near miss. Then he sat in a chair that was by the back door, and he ate popcorn that came from somewhere. "You got this," he called again, cheering the clearly frustrated Harry along. "Why am I chasing a chicken?" Harry asked, once more missing the bird and landing face down on the grass. "You have to train your body to be more flexible. You don't need weight training. The serum will take care of that, but you have to adapt to the difference in your body. You are taller and stronger today, I'm sure you noticed. You need to work out the best way to move your body. Chasing a chicken will limber you up, Deadpool explained as if it was obvious. I don't get it, but I trust you, Harry said, once more chasing the wily chicken around the yard. That'll be a first, the masked man mumbled. After 20 minutes of chasing, Harry finally caught the chicken. He wasn't even winded, just dirty. Now what? He asked, putting the bird back on the ground. He didn't want to hurt it. Now you go upstairs and study your books. I've got to do something, Wade said, getting up from the chair and making the popcorn and chicken disappear. Are you a wizard? Harry asked, looking behind his new friend as if to see where he was stashing things. No, why? Deadpool asked, tilting his head in confusion. Where do you put all that stuff? Harry asked, not finding anything. What stuff? The still confused man asked, though he did look to the right and wink. You know what, never mind, the boy said, giving up on understanding the man. I'll go read. Maybe I can find a name for my owl. He then went into the house to do just that. Deadpool waited until he could hear the boy go to his room, then he too went into the house. Quiet as a mouse, he snuck into all the downstairs rooms, including the one under the stairs. There was an office on the bottom floor, so he went in there to see what he could find. The place looked like it had already been ransacked. There were folders strewn about, and papers everywhere. Wade didn't know if Vernon was just lazy, or if he was looking for something before he left today. That was all right, Deadpool would look through it all and find Harry's stuff. It took a while, but he came up with Harry's birth certificate, his school records, shot records, and other such things. He also found the statements that proved that Vernon was getting paid by both Harry's bank and the government. That would come in handy. He tucked it all away, somewhere. He then looked to see if there was a bank account number hanging around and hit the jackpot with a little black book. Why Dursley hadn't taken it with him, Wade didn't know, or care. He was going to bleed that account dry. There wasn't much in it, but it was what was owed Harry, well, almost enough. He went to the bottom of the stairs, and yelled up, Harry, are you finished studying yet? He was an impatient man. Yes, the over-exuberant boy said, coming out of his room. I found a name for my owl. I'm going to call her Hedwig, he said as he bounced down the stairs. What a strange name, Deadpool said, putting his hand on Harry's shoulder and guiding him to the kitchen. The boy must be starved, he knew he was. Says the man called Deadpool. It's after a goddess, Harry defended his choice. It was in my history of magic book. He followed Deadpool into the kitchen, and when the man started pulling food out, he went to help. Oh, well, that explains it then, Deadpool said, putting lunch meat on the counter, and watched Harry get the rest. What are we going to do after lunch? Harry wanted to know. Run, the man said, taking some bread to make his own sandwich. Eat as much as you want, he added to the still slim child. He may have filled out, but he was still scrawny. Deadpool figured that it would take weeks to see the full effects. Where are the Dursleys? Harry asked, taking a plate of ham and cheese sandwiches to the table. Deadpool followed with his own plate of cheese and peanut butter ones. Don't know, don't care, the man answered, then asked, why an owl? Hagrid says they deliver the post, the boy said, scrunching his nose at Wade's choice of fillings. Post? As in mail? Yeah. Silence fell and the two ate their meals. They then went for a run, as far as Harry could, which Wade carried him back. They then ate a huge meal of leftovers from the refrigerator. So, the week went, Deadpool would make up some strange exercise, while Harry floundered along, until he got it right. They would study, eat, run, eat, sleep, then do it all again the next day. It was a week later that Vernon showed up. His face purple, which Harry knew meant the man was mad. Oh no, Harry said, when he saw his uncle. PFFT, Deadpool said, slamming the door in the man's face and locking the door. That'll teach him, he said as he walked away. They were going to turn into the living room when the shot rang out. Whoa, Deadpool yelled. First he grabbed Harry and they jumped, then he looked to make sure the kid wasn't hurt. It seemed on he took the round. Harry said, looking at the door, but backing up in case the man did it again. What an asshole. Who does shit like that? He asked, pushing Harry into the living room, and going to the door. He looked through the hole there, and then opened it. I can't believe you shot up your own house, he said, reaching forward and taking the rifle off the man, and pointing directly at him. You don't look like no gangster to me. Too fat, too white, and I mean that in the kindest way, too stupid, by which I mean I'm surprised you know which end to hold, he added, poking Vernon in the belly with the rifle. Harry, and we really need a new name, I'm going to have to off your uncle, he called into house. Vernon sat shocked that the bleeding man was still alive. The round went straight into him. He could see from the man's shirt that he had been hit. Suddenly, I'm okay with that, and there's nothing wrong with my name, the boy said, from where he was hiding behind the couch. We'll have to hide in the magical world. They won't find you there, he said insightfully. Smart kid, Wade said to no one, then he turned to Vernon. Hey, you blubbering whale, why did you try to shoot me? He wondered out loud. You stole all my money, the very frightened man said, pointing a finger at Deadpool. No, I took Harry's money. We had this talk. Are you simple? Deadpool said, cocking the rifle, and firing, done talking. He only hit him in the side because Vernon tried to run and that was as far as he got. There was a 50-50 chance he'd make it. Then again it looked like Fat Boy had a heart attack. Still. Lord Pomeroy, you can come out now? Wade said, kicking the down man's foot. Yup, still twitching. You're not calling me that, Harry said with a glare. Why not? Never mind. Did you really kill him? The boy asked, coming up to his side and looking at his uncle. He could see blood leaking from the man, and he was surprisingly not upset. He might live, Wade said, turning the kid around. He glared at the people who were gawking from their lawns and windows. At least it's not the 2000s yet, or they'd be filming it. Go pack your stuff, we've got to get out of here, he said, running up the stairs to get his costume and the few clothes he had purchased. I'll just shove it all in my trunk, Harry said as he ran up the stairs too, keeping pace with the man. I'll send Hedwig off and be ready in 2 minutes. Since he met the man, his was stronger and faster. He zipped around the room and shoved everything he wanted to keep in the trunk. His wand was put in a strap on his arm. Wade said that carrying one in the back pocket was stupid on a super level. Hedwig, come find us later, he said, opening the window so she could leave at her leisure. Come on, Deadpool said as he rushed, picking up the trunk and carrying it under his arm. Do you know a quick way there, but I don't want to be chased through London? He asked the child. Yeah, come on, Harry said, going to the curb. He held out his wand, just like Hogwarts a history said, and suddenly there was a loud boom. He jumped back and almost toppled Deadpool. It was a good thing that Wade had made him read that book. Something about knowing the lay of the land. Watch it, kid, Wade said, tucking his mask in his suit. He didn't want accidents. Thank you for calling the night bus, I am Rupert, your conductor for the day, a tall skinny man said, reading off a card. 2 please, Harry said, scurrying into the bus. It was empty of passengers. I have to get the money out of my trunk. We're kinda in a hurry, he added, waving Wade to put his trunk down. He opened it and then roughly shoved things around until he came up with his money bag. Don't worry about it, kid. I got this, Deadpool said, pulling 2 gold coins out of one of his pouches. Keep the change. We're going to the Leaky Cauldron, he said, like he took the night bus every day. Rupert pocketed the change. Why are you dressed like that? He asked, waving them to some recliners. They took the seat, after Harry closed his trunk. Like what? Deadpool asked. This is the way everyone dresses now. It's the latest fashion, he said, puffing his chest out. He dusted invisible dust off his shoulder. Are you a muggle? The conductor asked, leaning forward to get a better look at the man in the red suit. Not really, Wade hedged, he was sure he wasn't human anymore. Well, all right then, Rupert said, then waved the driver to get going. 2 minutes later, and some very close calls that had even Deadpool clutching his chair in fear, and screaming like a girl, they were there. They got off the bus and went to the shady pub. This place is great, Harry said, going up to Tom the bartender. It's not Sister Margaret's school for wayward girls, but it'll do for now, Deadpool said, following Harry with the trunk. You went to a pub called Sister Margaret's? What did they serve? Warm milk, Harry asked, not sure if the man was teasing him or not. No, it was a regular bar, real alcohol, Wade said, nodding to the bartender. How do you know what bars serve? He asked the kid as he nodded to all those looking and listening. Uncle Vernon would take prospective clients to one. He'd tell Aunt Petunia what they drank. Sometimes it was what they called foo-foo drinks, Harry said, watching the crowd to see if they were going to mob him. They didn't. Name's Tom, the bartender said, wiping a glass. It looked like it was more for something to keep his hands busy, since there were magical rags cleaning the other glasses. Deadpool, Wade said, putting the trunk on the floor. We are looking for accommodations. I need to ask, what are you doing with young Harry? The man said in a lower voice. He didn't want a mob either. We need a place to stay for the summer, Deadpool reiterated, this time a bit of menace in his voice. He's cool, Tom. He's like a doctor for me. I had a bit of an accident and he's staying with me to make sure I'm all cured, Harry said quickly, trying to think of anything that would pass muster. Yeah, like a doctor, Wade said, his voice far more cheerful. You don't look like no healer I've ever seen, Tom said, but he was looking at Harry as if to see if the boy spoke the truth. Harry had on his most innocent expression. He is really helping me, he said with a smile. Look, Tom, was it? We need get rooms for the summer. I get that Harry is some kind of hero to you guys, but if I'm not with him, then things will happen, Deadpool stated, taking a knife out of somewhere and picking it where his nails would be if he weren't in his suit. All right, the barman said, getting a key to a double room. Room number 10. It's at the top of the stairs, and the only one with 2 beds, he said, handing the key to Harry. You watch yourself, you hear? He said to the boy. Harry nodded and quickly started up the stairs. When he got there, Hedwig rapped on the window. She must move faster if she knows where to go. Or she was off hunting last night. Either way, he was glad she was here. He opened the window and watched her sail in and land on the headboard. We're going to have to get you a stand, Harry said, petting her chest, which she seemed to like. We're going to need to get you some robes, he said to his companion. Not the baby blue ones you had, something with a hood, so you don't have to wear your suit. Hey, I like the baby blue ones, that's why I stole them, Deadpool stated, putting his hands on his hips as if he had just been insulted and was protesting. No, you said it was the author, Harry pointed out. Oh, right, it was. Okay, we'll get some red ones with a hood like you said, the pleased man said, thinking of all the things he could do with robes, which wasn't much but. Okay, robes were going to suck. And no stealing, Harry tried, knowing he was likely to fail. No promises, the masked man said, shucking his suit for jeans and hoodie. Come on, get your books out. I want to hear more about the Goblin Wars, he said like an eager child. You can read about them yourself, Harry protested as he got out his history book. I never had anyone willing to read to me before, so don't be an ass, Wade said, settling down in a cross-legged position on the floor. That and they are very cool. I wonder if I can join them. What do you think? Am I ugly enough? He questioned the boy. I'm not touching that, Harry said, settling in the only chair in the room and opening to where he had left off. He started to read out loud, and Deadpool acted like any other child listening to an adult. They stayed that way until the end of the chapter. Harry then said, I need to go to the bank. He picked up his money bag and key, that Deadpool had lifted off Hagrid, and went to the door. Wait, Deadpool said, getting up from the floor, I want to come with. He pulled up his hood and shucked on some shoes. We should get that robe for me, sooner rather than later, he added, not sure if he liked the feeling of blending in when he was so used to standing out. On second thought, let them talk, he said with decisiveness. Okay, but I need to get a stand for Hedwig and I want to get some more books. Can I trust you not to rob Gringotts? He asked, already knowing the answer, but he had to try. No promises, but you have my word you won't be there if I do, he said, crossing his heart in a childish gesture. I guess that will have to do, Harry sighed, sounding much older than his 11-year-old self. The serum was making him more mature. Though, hanging around Deadpool made that work faster, since he had to be the grown-up here. The two left the pub, and Harry opened the portal to Diagonally. Welcome to Diagonally, he said to his companion. Deadpool, of course, had already been there, but it had been from the rooftops. He was closer to the action now and could hear the barkers and complainers quite well. The problem was he had no idea what any of them were talking about. What the hell is newt spit? And why is it 5 sickles? Wasn't a sickle something you used to cut crops? He asked Harry, who just shrugged. They walked down the cobblestone street, which had no vehicles, towards the large white marble building. The whiteness of it made Deadpool pull out a pair of shades and don them. Damn, that is bright, he said to Harry, handing the boy a pair of dark glasses as well. Harry just nodded, put on the glasses, and walked along. They were getting lots of looks since neither were wearing robes. Most thought they were muggles, which was fine by the duo. They had nothing to hide, yet. Deadpool would smile, though they couldn't see it with his hood up, and wave at them, making many sniff at him and turn away. Asshole, Wade would call out to them. Or bitch, as the case may be. For all the hot people, male or female, he would let out a wolf whistle and growl, making many people skirt the two. Must you? Harry asked, already knowing the answer but trying anyway. He then realized he did that a lot, and he really should stop and just go with it. Life would be much easier. Never mind, he said quickly, before Wade could answer with something inane. Deadpool was thinking of things he could do here, and what entertainment he could muster. He'd just have to make sure that Harry wasn't around to cockblock him. The kid was doing a good job of trying to do that. He had already toned down his actions, but felt it was time to let his wild side loose. They came to Gringotts, and Wade was impressed and challenged by the warning on the second door. He went up to the shortest line and waited, very impatiently, tapping his toes the entire time. The line moved so slow that he was plucking hairs off the person in front of him. He would sniff them and then throw them away. "What are you doing?" Harry asked, giving him a queer look. "Checking to see if this is a crack fic yet," Deadpool said, looking to the right and glaring at the author. "Is it?" the boy asked, not sure what a crack fic was, but decided if Deadpool thought it was a good thing, it probably was not. "The hair is inconclusive," Deadpool said as he plucked a hair from Harry. Harry just glared but said nothing. "I'm going to have to check every now and then, just to make sure," Deadpool said, sniffing Harry's hair and grinning. "You do that," Harry said, smacking Wade's hand when he went to pull more of his hair. "But I'm bored," the man whined, tapping his feet again. "Why don't you think of ways you can train me now that we are here?" Harry suggested, tapping his chin in thought. Then he got a horrified look on his face when he realized what he had just said. "I'll do that," Deadpool said, adopting a thinking position, only moving when the line did. They got to the teller and Deadpool said, "Hey, can I talk to the head honcho?" He asked it like it was something everyone did every day. He had been tempted to say, "Take me to your leader," but he figured the joke would be lost on this crowd. Harry looked at him strangely. He had no idea what the man wanted to say to the guy in charge. He knew that it probably didn't bode well for him. He looked at all the people looking at them and shrugged. Who gave a fuck what they thought? Deadpool was a bad influence on him. He would need to keep that in check. "Why should he speak to the likes of you?" the teller asked, snarling at the man he perceived to be Muggle. There wasn't a speck of magic influence on the man. His clothes strongly suggested non-magical. The teller had no idea why a Muggle would need to speak to his leader. "Well, if he doesn't, I'm going to rob the place clean," Wade said as if he was talking about the weather. He grinned, and showed the goblin his face, so the being could see he was serious. "What?" the goblin exclaimed, and then laughed uproariously. The man's face didn't bother him, his words were hilarious. "Here, hold my beer," Deadpool said, putting his hood back around his face and handing Harry a can of stout he got from somewhere. "What?" the boy said as he looked at the can in his hand. But Deadpool had vanished. The goblin glared at Harry, who shrugged and popped the can open and handed it to the teller. "He didn't say not to drink it," he said, looking towards where he knew his companion had disappeared too. "I don't drink human alcohol," the goblin said, handing the beer back to Harry. He sneered at the boy, who took out his key and handed to the teller. "When he's done, I need to go to my vault," the boy said, as if his friend was not robbing the bank. "We will see," the teller said, taking the key and examining it. He nodded and gave it back. "If your friend is still alive, someone will take you there," he said, settling down to wait for word of the Muggle's demise. They would have to deal with the boy, but he really wasn't doing anything wrong. Just then Deadpool appeared, in his costume and a red robe, his swords poking out of the neck, holding a sack of gold. "Here you go, proof that I can rob you blind," he said to the goblin, who opened the bag and noted that it was indeed full of gold. "How do I know you didn't just pickpocket some unsuspecting wizard?" the teller asked, putting the gold down and trying to stare down the man whose eyes were covered. It didn't work out well for him. "Wait for it," the masked man said, and a few minutes later the alarm started blazing. "Damnation," the teller said, and waved the guards over to his window. "Seize him," he bellowed, pointing to Deadpool. If they could only see the smirk on the man's face, they would have faltered. Deadpool did what Deadpool did best. He fought back. With a lot of creative kicking and punching, in a matter of minutes all the guards were unconscious. He stood in the middle of them, not even winded. He was clapping his hands together as if to rid them of dirt. "There, now you know you can't stop me, can I see the head guy now?" Wade said as he came back to Harry, who was staring at him in dismay. Couldn't the guy behave for one day? The customers of the bank did what they normally would do at times like this. They screamed and ran from the building. Harry just smirked at them, so much for the brave adults. The goblin, seeing the bank cleared and his guards downed, did the only thing he could do, he took them to his leader. They walked down a long stone hallway, that was covered with tapestries of battle. Harry and Deadpool admired the artwork and wondered if they depicted real battles, or were just art. "Wait here," the still unnamed goblin said, going through a jewel-adorned door. They waited, for all of 3 seconds, when Deadpool decided to just enter. The guards there took exception and charged him. They lasted longer than the ones in the lobby, but not by much. "My dead grandmother hits harder than that," was one of the many things Deadpool said as he decimated the goblin guards. "You punch like a little human girl," he said as he kicked one guard away. "Whoa, did you feel the breeze on that hit?" he stated as he ducked a slow punch then kneed the goblin's face that had thrown it. "Come on, aren't you guys even trying?" he said, taking one of the spears and knocking down 5 goblins with it. "You wusses wouldn't know a fight if it bit you." He threw the last few goblins into the wall. "You're lucky I'm not shooting you," he added as he headbutted a goblin that charged him. Finally, he was done playing with them and knocked them all out, but for one, who was tied up with some purple ribbon. The goblin looked very put out about that. It was humiliating. "So, you the head guy?" Wade asked the goblin that sat on the throne, who had watched the whole thing with large eyes. He waved Harry to join him. "I want to make a deal with you," he said, pulling a knife out of somewhere and tossing it up and down in his hand. "I have an offer you can't refuse." He tried, but got no response, not even from Harry. They just looked at him funny. "You dare to come into my bank, best my guards, and then ask to make a deal?" the king said, standing from his throne. He was dressed in fine clothes and a golden crown. He was larger than most goblins and did have an air of royalty about him. His skin was a darker green than his subjects. "Yeah, isn't that the way you'd do it?" the confused masked man asked, thinking any warrior would do it that way. That caused the goblin to pause and think. He then nodded his head in agreement and said, "Name your deal." It was better to hear the man out, than to throw more goblins at him. He could tell the man was a warrior of great strength. "See, Harry here needs someone to spar against. I'm too fast for him, so I figured you guys could give him a tussle every day until he goes to school. Then I'll take over. I'll even let your guys spar with me for free," Deadpool explained his idea. "And let me tell you, there are people who would pay good money to hit me repeatedly." He puffed out his chest like that was an accomplishment. "Wait, don't I get a say in this?" Harry asked, not really against the idea, but it would have been nice to be asked. Deadpool was right, he was too strong for Harry. It would be nice to spar with someone he could beat in time. That and maybe the goblins had better lessons than Wade thought up. Though, he was getting good at catching chickens. He was up to 4 now. "No," was all Wade said, still looking at the king, who had resumed his seat. "So, you are saying the boy is strong, and you need someone to train him in that strength?" the king said, looking at the buffed-up Harry. He did note that the boy was much bigger than the reports he had received when Potter had visited the bank before. "I don't see a problem with this. As long as you keep your promise not to rob us," he added with a threat in his voice. The man may have bested his best guards, but he, as king, had more than strength on his side. "Deal," Deadpool said, thinking it was more fun to rob the wizards than the goblins. That didn't mean he was going to let them off easy. He would test their security daily, until it was time to leave. "Deadpool," Harry whined, not really meaning it, but he wanted to give the guy a hard time. "What? It'll make you stronger. That way you can kick Voldy's butt," the masked man said, turning to face the child. "I know," was all Harry said, with an impish grin. "Asshole," Wade said, though he too was smiling. Not that anyone could tell, but they could hear it in his voice. "Okay," he said, turning back towards the king. "I'm Deadpool. This is Harry Potter. What is your name?" "I am King Ragnarok," the goblin said, still seated on his throne. His guards finally recovering themselves, surrounded him. "I will set you up with my best warrior teachers for the boy. You, Deadpool, may spar with all challengers." "Good deal," Deadpool said, and then shrunk down to chibi size, even looking younger, like a kid with huge white eyes. His suit even took on a softer color, still red, but not as bright. They all heard the sound of hooves coming from the hall. A minute later, there entered a pink unicorn, also chibi size. "Frank," Chibi Deadpool said, running to the unicorn and jumping on his back. "What mockery is this?" the king said, outraged. "What? If your guys want to stand a chance against me, this is best," Chibi Deadpool said, brandishing a wooden sword. "Charge," he said, going to the nearest guard, who lowered his spear and stuck the chibi man in the heart. He lifted the chibi off the unicorn and was horned in the nuts for his trouble. He howled and dropped the spear, making Deadpool pull it out and hit the downed goblin on the head. "Bad form, old man." He then jumped back on the unicorn and left the room. "Yeah," Harry said, rubbing the back of his head in embarrassment, "that's Deadpool. He lifted his hand in the direction of where the other man disappeared and shrugged. About those lessons, he said, not wanting to make excuses for the crazy costumed man. So that is how the next 3 weeks went. Harry would report for lessons on how to use his ever-increasing strength, and Deadpool tested the security of Gringotts. When he was done with that, he took on challengers. He won. Every time. They had no defense against him. He didn't steal anything he didn't return, but they had to up their security every day. In a way they were thankful, because they had never thought to put protections from non-magical infiltrations. Deadpool showed them the error of their ways. They even offered to pay him for it, which of course he took. He wasn't stupid. It was the last day in Diagon Alley. They were purchasing everything they thought they would need. More books, more clothes, more supplies, more weapons in Deadpool's case, which led to exchanging Harry's old trunk for a multi-department one. They went everywhere and found many treasures. Deadpool had a great time in Nocturne Alley. He beat the tar out of a lot of wizards that thought he was an easy target. Why they thought that, confused the man. Didn't they see the swords on his back? Did they think they were there for decoration? Wizards, he'd never understand them. Once they got everything they could think of, they retired early. They were off to Hogwarts tomorrow. Harry and Wade were in the train station. The ticket said to go to platform 9 3/4, but there was no such place. Deadpool walked between the pillars of 9 and 10, but he couldn't make hide nor hair of it. Then Harry leaned against the middle pillar to watch him and fell through. Found it, he said when he reappeared. Yay, now we can go to Hogwarts. I still say that is a cool name, Wade said, handing the trunk to Harry, who shouldered it. Hogwarts, it just rolls off the tongue, he said, not caring who was listening. How are you even going to get in? You're not magical, Harry asked, not sure what the guy's plan was. They walked through the pillar and each exclaimed over the red train, cool. Oh, ye of little faith, Deadpool said, bringing the subject back to his getting in Hogwarts and shrinking down to chibi size. I say again, you are not magical. How are you doing that? The boy said as he led the way onto the really cool train. I'm mimicking the comics, was the confusing answer. What? Harry said, putting his trunk on the rack of the first cabin he came to. He wasn't picky. He pulled out his school robes and put them over his nice clothes. He didn't want to get dressed in front of others. Even if it was just putting on a robe. Never mind, let's just go with the author thinks it's cute, said the cute chibi. He was dressed in red robes with a hood. His suit was on underneath, but he chose not to wear his mask, yet. His face was hidden as were his swords. He didn't want to put them away, so he just put the robe over them. They'd be difficult to get to, but he was on a train that would be full of kids. What could happen? You're going to have to explain that to me one day, Harry said, getting tired of the reference to this author person. It wasn't like his life story was a book. All over the world people giggled, and Harry felt a disturbance in the force. He looked around and saw nobody, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being laughed at. Maybe when Fairywm isn't so lazy, sure we can talk, Deadpool said, waving the conversation away. You still haven't explained how you're going to get into the school. You don't have an invitation and you're not magical, the boy reiterated, ignoring the statement about some bird named Fairywm. What kind of name is that? He never got a straight answer out of this guy. I'll just say that I'm your bodyguard, my little yellow box says that will work. It's a gig I've done before, Wade said still in his chibi form. He was going to stay like that until necessary. He didn't want to scare the kids too much. My bodyguard? The kid asked, tilting his head a bit. I can take care of myself, you know. You're the one who made sure of that, he added, pointing a finger at his friend. Your little yellow box might be wrong. Look, I know you did well with the goblins, but you can't fight kids your age with that kind of strength. You're still learning to control that. I, on the other hand, am dashingly handsome and I can control my strength, Deadpool said, preening a bit. He pulled on his mask so there would be no accidental sightings of his face. And my little yellow box is never wrong. He ignored the fact that he even had a little yellow box, which had in fact been wrong once or twice. I'm more handsome than you, Harry protested, in a joking manner. He thought Wade handled his looks really well. He never told him the whole story, but it was a bad one. Harry knew that because Wade talked in his sleep. Kid, when you've got a girl as hot as mine, we can talk. Until then, accept that I am more handsome, Wade said, glaring at the kid. Not that Harry knew that, he was still chuckling. Just then the door opened, and a sandy-haired boy asked, "Have you seen a toad?" His voice was so quiet they almost didn't hear him. Can't say that I have, Deadpool said, making the new kid do a double take. Why are you dressed like that? The boy asked, his eyes narrowing and blinking many times, like he could not believe what he was seeing. It's the latest Muggle fashion, Wade said in a neutral tone. Are you going to tell everyone that? What if a Muggleborn asks? Harry said, exasperated. Fine, I was caught in a fire and my face is hideous, Deadpool said, folding his arms like a petulant child. Why couldn't Harry just go with it? Co-blocker. Oh, I'm sorry, the unnamed boy said, coming further into the compartment. Are you Muggleborn? He asked, taking a seat across from them. Half, Harry said with a great deal of pride. Nil, was Deadpool's answer, which confused the boy. I'm Harry Potter, my friend is Wade, Harry said, trying to get a conversation going. He really didn't know anyone his age. Dudley didn't count, especially since he was the reason Harry had no friends. He did wonder if his uncle was dead or alive and he wasn't sure which he preferred. Neville Longbottom, the boy said, still looking at the strange kid. He didn't even look twice at Harry, which was fine by the boy who lived. Longbottom? What a cool name, Deadpool said, shaking the boy's hand. I guess, Neville said, still staring. I like it too, Harry said, bringing the boy's attention to him. Wait, did you say Potter? Neville said, looking thoughtfully at Harry. Harry sighed, and slumped. He nodded and lifted his hand in a go-ahead gesture. You don't look anything like your pictures, Neville said, peering closely at Harry. I see your scar, but it's faint and you're bigger, and you have no glasses, he pointed out, gesturing to Harry like he was expecting him to transform. I had a bit of help, was Harry's explanation. Wade here helped me. That's why he's here, to continue helping me, he said, pointing to the pouting chibi man. That's right, Deadpool said, perking up. I'm all sorts of helpful, he boasted, puffing out his chest in a prideful manner. Like I can help you by saying, dude, lose the toad, he said seriously. But my uncle. The new boy tried, only to be cut off by Wade. If your uncle is anything like Harry's, then he meant it as an insult, Wade said, seeing the boy was painfully shy, probably from emotional abuse. Take it as one and lose the toad. I'm not sure I can do that to an innocent animal, Neville said, thinking hard on it. He nodded his head and said, I'll go and find him, but set him free when we get to Hogwarts. I hear there's a lake, he should like that. With that decided, he left to further his search. He seems like a good chap, Harry commented when the boy had gone. Do you really think they will buy the bodyguard bit? He asked his companion. I don't care what they buy. I'm going to be at your school one way or another, Deadpool said, leaning his head back like he was going to take a nap. Wake me if something interesting happens. Like Hugh Jackman showing up. Now that man's a hottie. And with that, he fell asleep. Who the hell is Hugh Jackman? Harry muttered, shaking his head at the man sleeping beside him. He then took out Hogwarts, a history, and started reading. He had read the book front to back already, but he did enjoy skimming some of the more interesting stories. He was 5 minutes into his reading when the train started to move. He looked to Deadpool but saw he was still sleeping. Or so he guessed, he couldn't see his face, but he was breathing deeply. There was a noise at the door, and it opened up to a freckled red-headed boy. Can I sit here? Everywhere else is full, the boy asked, already dragging his trunk in and sitting down. He pushed the trunk under the seat. Sure, just don't wake up Wade, Harry said, turning back to his reading. Just then Deadpool mumbled something about Wolverine and was complaining that whoever that was wasn't any fun. You cock-blocking son of a bitch, let me have my fun, he muttered, turning over to face Harry. Don't mind him. He's just dreaming, Harry said, jerking his head at his friend's sleeping form. Oh, was all the redhead said, looking at the bizarrely dressed boy. Why is he dressed like that? It's the latest Muggle fashion, Harry said, not seeing Wade smirk in his sleep. Muggles are weird, the boy said, his eyes still firmly on the costumed boy. Just then a girl with bushy hair and buck teeth came by and asked about Neville's toad. Nope, still haven't seen it. Did you try the lose? Harry asked, closing his book, and placing it in his lap. He was never going to get quiet, and those seconds were precious to him ever since Wade came into his life. No, but that is certainly a good idea, she said, looking at the title of his book. Hogwarts, a history, she said, excitedly. So far, she hadn't found anyone who had read it. I love that book. I do too, Harry said, squeezing over to let her sit by him. Wade mumbled some more but ignored them. He patted the seat, but she shook her head. I have to help Neville. I promised, she said, looking down the hall to see the boy in question knocking on another door. You could help too, she said, looking back at Harry. I can't leave Wade by himself, Harry said, with a sad shake of his head. Therein lies badness. Who is Wade? She asked, looking between the two other boys in the compartment. Not me, I'm Ron Weasley, the redhead said, pointing to the sleeping boy. Why is he dressed like that? The still unnamed girl asked, peering at the costumed kid. He likes that costume, Harry tried, knowing this girl was Muggleborn because she was just too excited about magic. Strange boy, the girl muttered, then straightened up and said, I'm Hermione Granger. She stuck out her hand for Harry to shake. Harry stood and got a firm grip, because he was still working on his strength, and shook it. I'm Harry Potter, he introduced himself. Nice grip, Hermione complimented/complained. It was a good grip, just tight. I've read about you, she said, looking him up and down and finding he looked nothing like she had read. She almost said more but. Isn't it? He's working on it, Deadpool said, finally deciding to get up. Who's this? He asked, pointing to the two new kids. That's Ron, and this is Hermione, Harry said, indicating each. Guys, this is Wade Wilson. Pleasure, Hermione said, still looking at him like he was weird. Nice costume, she said tentatively. Thanks, it hides my ugly face, Wade said, sitting up and stretching. She's going to be a looker when she grows into those teeth, he told Harry, making Hermione's jaw drop. I beg your pardon, she said aghast. She wasn't sure if she was just offended or not. Begging isn't good for the soul, Deadpool stated with a sage nod. Are you ever serious? Hermione asked, looking to see how Ron was reacting. He was just staring at Harry. No, that's Harry's godfather, was the strange comeback. I really should get him out of jail, he muttered to the fourth wall, like he was telling the author to get on it. She shrugged and went on typing. I have a godfather? Harry asked, wondering if Wade was just making it up. Yeah, though I'm not sure how I know about him, Deadpool said, looking at the ceiling like it had the answer. Then he shrugged and went with it. I'll see about setting up a meeting, he said to Harry. If he couldn't prove him innocent, then he could break him out of prison. Ha, was all Harry said, then he turned to Hermione. You are welcome to come back when you and Neville have found the toad, he offered, and quickly added, Neville too. I'll tell him, she said, and all but skipped out of the room. Nice skipping, Deadpool said, getting up and skipping out of the door, only to skip back in a moment later. What? I like skipping. Are you Barmy? Ron asked, looking at Wade like he was crazy. Yes I am, the chibi man said, completely serious. He is, Harry agreed, nodding sagely. Oh, was all Ron could say to that. What else could he say? So, you're Harry Potter? Can I see your scar? He asked, in a desperate need to change the subject. Harry and Wade looked at one another and shrugged. Harry lifted his bangs and showed the much diminished scar. Oh, I thought it'd be bigger, Ron said, slumping back in his seat disappointed. Well, I'm not going to apologize for it being smaller. I prefer it that way, Harry huffed, folding his arms over his chest. No, I mean, the books, Ron said, only for Wade to cut him off. Are bullshit, Deadpool finished, making a slashing motion with his hands. Those pieces of tripe need to be burned. And I am against book burning. I agree, Harry said, also against book burning. We found him, Hermione said as she came into the compartment. Neville followed right behind her. Where? Harry wanted to know if he was correct. In the boys' loo, Neville said with a smug grin. Yes, I was correct, Harry cheered, getting up from his seat and doing a victory dance. Everyone looked at him like he was nuts. Sorry, I've been hanging around Wade too much, he said, embarrassed. He sat back down. Wade clapped him on the back and said, nice dance. Never be ashamed of showing emotions. I guess, Harry said, knowing they were the right words, but he couldn't shake off public opinion like Deadpool could. Then again, if he was going to be a hero, he'd better get used to bad press. That a boy, Deadpool said, clapping him on the back again. So, what games can we play? He asked the other three. And that's it for part 1 of this wild ride. Deadpool's just getting started, and Harry's life will never be the same. If you enjoyed the madness, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss part 2. This is Butterfly Fictions, where fiction gets a little unhinged. See you in the next one.